Moving to New York City had always been a dream. Growing up in a small town, I longed for the city's energy, for the chance to get lost in its endless streets and find something, maybe even myself. But as much as I wanted to dive headfirst into my new life, there was something unsettling that had followed me all the way here. Something I couldn't shake off, no matter how many miles lay between me and my past. It was my family's unspoken history. Growing up, my parents had been secretive about one thing, my half-brother. We shared the same father, but everything else about him was a mystery. I had only a name and a faint memory of a story, something about him drifting away from the family when I was too young to understand why. Whenever I asked questions, I was met with vague answers, or more often, silence. Over time, it became a shadow hanging over us, always there, but never mentioned. After I settled into my new apartment, I couldn't get him out of my head. In a city filled with millions of people, something pushed me to look for him. I wondered where he was, what he was like, and why my family had seemingly erased him from their lives. It was like solving a puzzle that had haunted me since childhood, and so, one evening, I decided to search online for any trace of him. It wasn't easy. His name brought up almost nothing, just fragments, glimpses of a life he seemed determined to keep hidden. After hours of digging, I found an obscure social media profile. The name and location matched what little I knew about him, but the profile itself was barren. A few grainy photos, a handful of cryptic posts with no comments or connections. It was like he existed only in shadows. I stared at the profile picture, trying to match the face to the vague memories I had of him. His eyes, though half hidden in shadow, felt strangely familiar, almost like looking in a mirror. Against my better judgment, I sent him a friend request. I told myself it was a long shot, but I couldn't shake the feeling that finding him would somehow complete the missing piece of my life. The next morning, I woke up to a notification he'd accepted my request. My heart raced as I clicked on his profile, expecting, I'm not sure what. Answers maybe. Clues. But there was nothing new there, just the same cryptic posts and shadowy photos. For days, I debated whether to reach out with a message. My mind kept racing, wondering what he'd be like, what he might think of me. Eventually I took the plunge. Hey, I typed, I think we might be related. Maybe it's time we meet. I pressed send and instantly regretted it. Hours went by with no response. I checked my phone obsessively, expecting some kind of reaction, anything. But there was nothing, just a void of silence that made me question if reaching out was a mistake. Then, 3 days later, he replied, Are you sure you want to meet me? That was all he wrote. The words felt like a warning, a caution from someone who knew something I didn't. I almost left it alone, but curiosity had its grip on me. I replied with a simple, yes. He told me to meet him at a secluded park on the edge of town, far from the bustling streets and bright lights. That night, I found myself walking into the park, my mind racing with questions. The place was deserted, and the street lamps cast long, eerie shadows across the path. Just as I was about to turn back, I saw him. He stood alone under a flickering light, his face partially hidden by the shadows. My heart pounded as I walked toward him, a stranger who was somehow tied to me by blood and secrets. He didn't say a word at first, he just stared, studying me in a way that made me feel like he could see straight through me. Finally, he broke the silence. They didn't tell you much about me, did they? His voice was low, almost a whisper. I shook my head, feeling suddenly small under his gaze. He began to tell me about his life, bits and pieces that didn't quite add up. He talked about moving around, about how he never stayed in one place for long. His stories were strange, filled with gaps and unsettling details that left me with more questions than answers. I wanted to ask him why he'd been shut out of the family, but something in his eyes stopped me. He handed me an old, faded photograph of our father, one I'd never seen before. In it, my father looked younger, but there was something off, a tension in his expression that I couldn't place. He didn't want me around, my brother said quietly, almost as if he was talking to himself. I was a reminder of things he'd rather forget. The longer we talked, the more uneasy I felt. He had a way of speaking that was both mesmerizing and unnerving, like he was pulling me into his world, a world filled with shadows and secrets. He told me about strange occurrences that followed him wherever he went, unexplained events, people who vanished, things he couldn't explain. At one point, he stopped, looked me in the eyes and asked, "Do you ever feel like someone's watching you?" The question sent a chill down my spine, but I forced a laugh, brushing it off as paranoia. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was right, that there was something lurking in the darkness around us. As the night went on, I felt myself being drawn deeper into his world. He told me about places he'd been, strange encounters with people who seemed wrong somehow. He spoke about a feeling that had haunted him his entire life, a sense that he was meant for something darker, something beyond his control. Then, as the first light of dawn began to break, he handed me a small, leather-bound book. "Read this," he said. "It's all in there, the truth about our family." Before I could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the mist like a phantom. I took the book home, and over the next few days, I read every page. It was filled with stories, stories of our ancestors, of secrets and betrayals that spanned generations. As I read, I felt a darkness settling over me, a weight that pressed down on my soul. It was like uncovering a curse that had been hidden for centuries, a curse that now rested on my shoulders. I tried to reach out to him, but he never responded. His profile vanished, and any trace of him seemed to fade away as if he'd never existed. But the stories he'd told me, the secrets he'd shared, they lingered in my mind, haunting me every day. Months passed, and life went on, but I was never the same. Every shadow felt like him watching, every quiet moment a reminder of the darkness that connected us. I realized that some family secrets are best left buried, for once they're uncovered, they have a way of taking hold and never letting go. Now I walk through the city, feeling his presence in every corner, in every dark alley. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of him out of the corner of my eye, only to turn and find no one there. And I wonder, had I not looked for him, would the darkness still have found me? Or was it always a part of me, waiting to be awakened?